Hello friends, मेरे प्यारे बच्चों, my loving students. This is just a quick explanation of OBG questions asked on 18th June 2021 FMG exam. I am Dr. Amit Gupta from MIST. Let's start our discussion. Question number 1. Which of the following peak is responsible for ovulation? And this image was given. Which of the following peak is responsible for ovulation? मेरे प्यारे बच्चों, my loving students, we have discussed in our classes very clearly that there are two peaks at the time of ovulation. One is the FSH peak and a big one is the LH peak. A smaller one is the FSH peak and bigger one is LH peak. Which peak is responsible for ovulation? We discussed lot of times. Minimum estradiol required for ovulation is 200 picogram per ml, which should sustain for 48 hours, and LH surge is attained because of this 36 hours before ovulation, which is followed by LH peak, which is attained approximately 10 to 12 hours before ovulation, and minimum LH required for ovulation is 75 nanogram per ml. What we were doing like chantings for all these things. So which peak is responsible for ovulation? This bigger one. LH peak, obviously, as you can see in this image, is responsible for ovulation. LH peak is responsible for ovulation. FSH peak also occurs, as you can see here. As you can see, this lower one, a smaller peak is FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, and the bigger peak is luteinizing hormone. But mainly responsible for ovulation is LH peak. Fine. Let's have a look at other options. Estrogen responsible for LH surge. So it is maximum approximately 36 hours before ovulation. It is gone. Progesterone peaks 8 days post ovulation, and if it is a regular 28-day cycle, on day 22 of course, so it is also gone. FSH, little peak, mainly responsible for ovulation is LH peak. Question number 2. False statement regarding following image is. Let's have a look at the image. This is the image which was given. This is manual vacuum aspiration syringe. And this has two pistons here, manual vacuum aspiration syringe. We discussed in our classes, we have clearly written in our class notes that this is a 60 cc syringe. Yes, it generates a 660 millimeter of negative pressure for aspiration. It is used in rural areas where no electricity is available. It is definitely not a 30 cc syringe if it is a 60 cc syringe. There's another syringe which is a menstrual regulation syringe. We discussed the topic of MTP about these syringes. Another syringe is menstrual regulation syringe. Menstrual regulation syringe is a 50 cc syringe. That's a 50 cc syringe. Have a look at that syringe. This is the menstrual regulation syringe. This is another one. It was not given in option. It has single piston, as you can see. This is the MR syringe, and this MR syringe is a 50 cc syringe. Both menstrual regulation syringe and manual vacuum aspiration syringe, they are used for first trimester MTP. This MR syringe, this can be used for 7 weeks, up to 7 weeks of pregnancy, fine? And this can be used up to 12 weeks of pregnancy. This one is a manual vacuum aspiration syringe. So false statement here is a 30 cc syringe. Question number 2. What is mostly associated with persistent occipito-posterior position? We know android pelvis, anthropoid pelvis, they are the causes of this. Deflexed head is a cause, but second most common one. So let's have a quick look at the option. Persistent occipito-posterior position, anthropoid pelvis, yes, and persistent occipito-posterior, then it becomes direct occipito-posterior, and face to pubes delivery. We have written clearly in our class note. Face to pubes delivery, face is facing towards pubis. Anthropoid, platypeloid, it is the rarest pelvis for flat pelvis or bowl-shaped pelvis. What happens here? Face presenting part is possible with platypeloid pelvis. Transverse is also possible with platypeloid pelvis, but not this persistent occipito-posterior. Gynecoid pelvis is the most common variety of pelvis, and the shape of inlet is oval. Deflexed head is the second one. So the best answer here would be anthropoid pelvis. Another question: what is the most common cause of shock immediately after delivery? See, most common cause of shock after delivery is PPH. But because the word immediately is given here in option, it would be uterine inversion. So PPH is gone. DIC is not the cause of death after delivery. DIC may occur due to various causes, the most common being abruptio placentae, other being PPH and intrauterine fetal demise. So DIC is gone, PPH is gone, uterine inversion, yes. Amniotic fluid embolism, it can't be amniotic fluid embolism because nothing like breathlessness is given, nothing like unexplained is given, because in this she won't complain of any pain. She'll just end up in shock because of pulmonary embolism due to amniotic fluid embolism. Nothing like that is given. Simple chocolate question. Most common cause of shock immediately after delivery. This question was specifically asked in mock 2 test in our test series. So uterine inversion is the best answer. A pregnant woman with prosthetic heart valves is on warfarin. She is on warfarin. She tests positive for pregnancy. What would you like to give her? If she tests positive for pregnancy, means this is just a first trimester pregnancy. She has been overdue for few days only. A pregnancy test has been done and a pregnancy has been detected. And we know very well that in first trimester, we don't give warfarin. If she is on warfarin, then we replace it with heparin because warfarin crosses placenta and may lead to Contradi syndrome, oromandibular hypogenesis, fetal warfarin syndrome. So we have to replace it with heparin. Continue warfarin throughout pregnancy? No way. Discontinue warfarin? No, we have to give something. Replace warfarin with heparin? Yes, this is the correct answer. There are two switchovers. One in first trimester. After 12 weeks, we can switch over to warfarin. And then after 36 weeks, we again switch over to heparin. After 12 weeks and up to 36 weeks, we give warfarin. Continue warfarin throughout pregnancy? No way. So the best answer is replace warfarin with heparin. Again, a direct question from our notes. We have written clearly in anticoagulation protocol in pregnancy in the topic heart disease in pregnancy. Which of the following is the most cost effective cheap cervical screening test? Little tricky question, but very simple chocolate question. Most cost effective cheap. So obviously they have to be the ones which are conducted in rural areas via and villi, visual inspection with acetic acid 3 to 5% or visual inspection with Lugol's iodine. Here via is given in options, so it is the answer. If the question would have been the best one, then answer would have been Pap smear. HPV DNA, how can it be most cost effective and cheap? Colposcopy, again it's not cheap, and colposcopy is done mostly when she is complaining of irregular bleeding per vaginum or if she comes with an abnormal Pap smear report, and then we immediately go for a careful per speculum examination, and if no lesion is visible, then we usually switch over to colposcopy. So answer to this question is via visual inspection with acetic acid. Another question, a 26-year gravida 4 female presents at 22 weeks gestation with history of 3 mid-trimester abortion. So she is presenting at 22 weeks and there is history of 3 mid-trimester abortions, recurrent abortion, habitual abortion. If there is history of 3 or more than 3 abortions, this is called recurrent or habitual abortion. Her cervical length is 15 mm, short cervix. If it is less than 2.5 centimeter in pregnancy, it is a short cervix. What is the most probable cause of her miscarriage? See, this is a recurrent abortion. The short cervix, chocolate question. So it has to be cervical incompetence because this cervix is not able to withstand with weight of fetus. So what will happen? It will start dilating early and fetus will be expelled out. And most common time of abortion due to cervical incompetence is 16 to 24 weeks. In question, examiner has specifically mentioned 22 weeks. 3 or more than 3 abortions means it is a case of recurrent or habitual abortion. Look here, how things happen. In these cases, how cervix start dilating. Look here. This is how cervix start dilating. This is normal cervix. This is a normal closed cervix, and you can see the shape. This is a T shape, as you can make out here. This is a T-shaped cervix. And when it starts dilating, first of all, it becomes Y shape, then it becomes a V shape, and then finally it becomes U. So the correct sequence is TYVU. This is how cervix start dilating. Because it is incompetent, no, just a 15 millimeter long cervix, how will it be able to withstand with the weight of cervix? So examiner has asked us what is the most probable cause, and our game is over at cervical incompetence. If the question would have been, what would be the best management for this problem, then the best management for this problem would have been cervical cerclage or McDonald stitches. See, we have applied stitches here, and these stitches provide tensile strength. We apply these stitches around 14 weeks of pregnancy, but they can be applied till 24 weeks. Even in this question, for 22 weeks is given. So they can be applied till 24. If the question would have been what would be the best management for her, cervical cerclage, and the best one is McDonald stitches. And these stitches, they are taken out at around 37 weeks of pregnancy. But if she is complaining of some leaking, or there are premature uterine contractions, preterm labor, then in all these cases, if there's any evidence of infection, we need to remove them early. Another question. Most common obstetric cause of DIC is? Most common obstetric cause of DIC is abruptio placentae without any doubt. In our notes, in our classes, we have written clearly management of abruptio placentae, immediate induction of labor due to risk of DIC. And if DIC sets in, treat DIC first with fresh frozen plasma, and then we will induce labor. Twins, no way. Intrauterine fetal demise, yes, DIC occurs, but it is not the most common cause of DIC. PPH, again, not the most common obstetric cause of DIC. PPH is most common cause of death in obstetrics, not of DIC. And death is due to hypovolemia, loss of blood. Which syndrome has false positive bar body? False positive bar body is X minus 1. So Turner is 45XO, so it is 0, no bar body. AIS is 46XY, androgen insensitivity syndrome, X minus 1, again no bar body. MRKH, Mayer-Rokitansky-Kuster-Haaser syndrome, 1 bar body, but not false positive, normal chromosomal configuration. Klinefelter's is 46XXY, so definitely there is additional X, false positive bar body is present in Klinefelter's syndrome. Asymptomatic postmenopausal woman presents with the following X-ray abdomen image. What is most likely? She is asymptomatic, postmenopausal, X-ray abdomen. Let's have a look at the X-ray abdomen. This was the image given. What students told me, this was the image given, and in this image, students told that most of the calcifications were peripheral. Anyways, this looks like a fibroid. Another differential diagnosis would have been ovarian tumor, that is a dermoid. But in dermoid, calcifications, teeth, cartilage, all these ectodermal elements are mostly present on Rokitansky protuberance, and they have a characteristic appearance. It can't be vesical calculus anyway, because vesical calculus is more central and that is more opaque. So let's have a look. Ovarian tumor is gone. Yes, it is a uterine fibroid. Vesical calculus is gone. Fecalith, it can't be a fecalith. Cause of lactational amenorrhea is, again we have been chanting, we have been doing discussing in our classes. Prolactin gives negative feedback to GnRH. So ultimately FSH and LH are reduced and our scooter's speed is slowed down. What happens during lactation? Because of excessive prolactin, there is negative feedback to GnRH. and FSH LH are reduced. Hypothalamo-pituitary ovarian axis, our scooter is retarded, which results in amenorrhea. So cause of lactational amenorrhea is definitely prolactin. It is definitely prolactin. Very simple chocolate question. What complication may occur with IV bolus oxytocin? IV bolus oxytocin is never given because of risk of hypotension. So answer is hypotension. Answer to this question is hypotension. This is why oxytocin is given as intramuscular injection or slow IV infusion. Prophylactic drug of choice for PPH is oxytocin intramuscular injection, 10 international units. Therapeutic drug of choice for PPH is oxytocin with slow IV infusion, 40 international units. Best and most potent drug to treat PPH is carboprost or Ambate, that is 15-methyl PGF2 alpha, 250 microgram intramuscular injection. If IV bolus oxytocin is given, it may lead to hypotension. Overlap with pharma also. A 23-year-old primigravida presents at 18 weeks gestation with fasting blood sugar more than 126 and HbA1c more than 6.5. What is likely? A 23-year-old primigravida at 18 weeks, fasting blood sugar 126, HbA1c 6.5, more than that. If it is a gestational diabetes, which is due to insulin resistance, which is due to human placental lactogen mainly, it starts at 20 weeks. Specifically, 18 weeks is mentioned, so it can't be a gestational diabetes mellitus. It is pre-gestational, and criteria for pre-gestational are these: fasting more than 126, HbA1c more than 6.5, random more than 200. So definitely it is a case of pre-gestational diabetes mellitus. And how we estimate plasma sugar during pregnancy? Glucose challenge test, glucose tolerance test according to American College of Gynecology. In India, we are mostly following DIPSI criteria, where we take fasting sample and then we give her 75 gram glucose and then we check plasma sugar after 2 hours. We have written everything clearly in our notes. All these criteria. A 24-year-old primigravida, her age is 24 years, attends antenatal clinic with BP 160 by 120. Her lab findings show increased liver enzymes, and increased LDH with low platelet count. What is happening? This is a case of HELLP syndrome. BP is increasing 160 by 120. Increased liver enzymes, increased LDH is because of hemolysis. So this is clearly a severely pre-eclamptic woman which is turning to HELLP syndrome. This is a case of severe preeclampsia which is turning to HELLP syndrome. So definitely it is HELLP syndrome. Let's have a look at other options. Hepatitis B. How can you correlate hypertension with that? It is gone. Acute fatty liver of pregnancy, there are various other symptoms and no correlation with hypertension. Obstetric cholestasis, the most common symptom presenting feature would be prurita. She will have severe itching, and on investigations there will be increase in bile pigment. Nothing like that is written, and treatment for that is ursodeoxycholic acid. So this is gone. Clearly a case of HELLP syndrome. A chocolate question. A 25-year-old primigravida, known case of bipolar disorder, and is on lithium since 2 years. What anomaly is likely? Lithium causes Epstein anomaly. A pregnant woman comes for checkup at 18 weeks. She is coming at 18 weeks. Her fundal height is 16 weeks. She is presenting at 18 weeks. And USG shows oligohydramnios. What is most likely? Fine. Fundal height is less because of oligohydramnios. So we have to identify the cause of oligohydramnios. Hydrocephalus, how fundal height may be reduced? A big head, it will contribute something to increase in fundal height, and moreover, hydrocephalus causes polyhydramnios. Anencephaly again results in poly and increased fundal height. Fetal renal agenesis, yes, this is the reason for oligohydramnia and fundal height would be reduced. Fetal anemia will lead to hyperdynamic circulation, which will result in increased fetal glomerular filtration rate, which will result in polyhydramnia. Circulation becomes hyperdynamic in fetal anemia, what we studied in the chapter of RH incompatibility. This is why we do fetal middle cerebral artery color Doppler, and if there is increase in peak systolic velocity more than 1.5 multiples of median. Do you remember that RH incompatibility topic? Because of hemolysis, fetal anemia develops in RH, and in RH what happens? Polyhydramnia. So no way it would cause oligohydramnia or reduced fundal height. So the answer obviously is fetal renal agenesis. Identify this image. I couldn't gather various other options, but this was very simple. So students just marked it. They knew this image. This is a Bartholin cyst, which is present on posterolateral wall of vagina. Differential diagnosis would have been a Gardner cyst, which is present on anterolateral wall of vagina. So chocolate single liner question, Bartholin cyst. A 25-year-old woman presents to labor room at 37 weeks gestation. She is 25 years and she is presenting at 37 weeks. She has mild labor pains and persistent 1 centimeter cervical dilatation for last 10 hours. Pains are also mild, they are not increasing, intensity of pains is not increasing, cervical dilatation is also not increasing. It is persistent for last 10 hours. So we have to be sure, we have to ascertain first whether she is in labor, whether she has entered labor or they are just false pains, false labor. What is the next management? We have clearly written in our notes management for prolonged latent phase. If it is like this, then we have to wait and watch. We will give her sedative and then she will wake up. She might have come to nursing home and she'll be admitted and then just go for Facebook, WhatsApp, Insta and all. You know, we discussed all this in our class. So we have to give her therapeutic rest and sedate her. Then she will wake up after 7 or 8 hours and she will say, I'm ठीक हूँ जी, मैं बिल्कुल ठीक हो गई. I am relieved now. तो हम कहेंगे घर जाओ जी, you are done. You were not in true labor. So the best would have been wait and watch. LSCS, no way. Why? First of all, let's be sure. And there is nothing like contracted pelvis or nothing like severe bleeding or something like that is written. Why to do CF? Augmentation with oxytocin is done if it is a case of slow or protracted active phase. She is just in a latent phase. ARM again for active phase. She is in latent phase. If at all she is, that's what we want to know. So answer is wait and watch. Fine. Next question. Identify this image, and a very simple image was given. This is the case, and this was asked actually. This was asked, what is this? You can clearly see there is a pedicle here. So this is a pedunculated fibroid. In our class notes, we have clearly written pedunculated fibroid. A fibroid has a pedicle. And this is which fibroid? This is a submucous fibroid. Chocolate question. So identify this image. This is a case of pedunculated submucous fibroid. Next question. A 58-year-old female presents with this growth at vulva. Again, an image was given. What is most likely? This is condyloma acuminata. Condyloma acuminata. This is what I gathered from the students. A female after delivery complains of cramps during breastfeeding. Which hormone is responsible for it? Cramps during breastfeeding, beta. Nothing pathological here. You remember our class? Mammogenesis is due to estrogen progesterone. Lactogenesis is due to prolactin and galactokinesis is due to oxytocin. And in our classes also we discuss kinetic energy. Something is moving. Ejection is due to oxytocin, and due to this ejection, due to this kinetic energy, she is experiencing these cramping pains during breastfeeding. So answer is again a chocolate question. Chocolate answer. Oxytocin. And mammogenesis is due to estrogen and progesterone, ductal growth estrogen, acinar growth progesterone, lactogenesis is due to prolactin, and galactokinesis is due to oxytocin. Another question. A pregnant female presents with bleeding PV and tender uterus, bleeding per vaginum and tender uterus. FSH is not audible. FHS is not audible. Not audible. What is most likely? We discussed this in our classes, we discussed in CCD session, we discussed in test and discussion session, and I specifically kept this question in mock test also. What is likely? Tender uterus, abruptio placentae, after abruption, thromboplastin, uterotonic, tender uterus, fetal parts not palpable, FHS not audible, chocolate question, chocolate answer, abruptio placentae. And we discussed in our classes in detail why all this is happening. See, OBG is not a single liner thing. OBG is conceptual. All clinical subjects are conceptual. I keep on saying listen conceptually, write conceptually, revise conceptually. Then only you can recall and mark appropriately. But I am very happy, very, very happy. All the students have done so well. I am eagerly waiting for the result. The messages they are sending, I am overwhelmed with those messages. I am really very happy with those messages. Sir, we did very well. We did very well. I feel really very happy with it. An individual with 46 XX chromosomes presents with normal secondary sexual characteristics. 46 XX. Secondary sexual characteristics are normal. Fine. Uterus and vagina are absent. Okay. Ovaries are also fine. Ovaries are normal. FSH and LH are also normal. See, ovaries normal, FSH, LH normal. So they are acting, FSH, LH are acting properly on ovary, and this is why they are also responding normally. Secondary sexual characters are normal, uterus, vagina absent, gonad is normal. Only thing is, looks like a Mullerian agenesis. Fine. What is likely? Turner syndrome. Secondary sexual characteristics absent. AIS, gonad is testis. MRKH syndrome, Mullerian agenesis plus renal plus spinal anomaly in Mayer-Rokitansky-Kuster-Hauser syndrome. Kelemen syndrome, no way. Remote control is out of order in Kelemen syndrome. Hypothalamus, defective migration of neurons from olfactory placode. This is why there is anosmia in Kelemen, and how secondary sexual characteristics can be normal in Kelemen. So answer is MRKH syndrome. A 16-year-old girl presents with primary amenorrhea. Her age is 16. She is presenting with primary amenorrhea. Secondary sexual characteristics are normal, well developed. On perispeculum examination, there is bluish bulging hymen. Okay, what is the best management? Oh my God. Examiner has not asked what is the cause or what is the most probable cause. You have to assume the cause and then decide the treatment here. So this is the two-step question. Fine. So first of all, what could be the thing? Bluish bulging hymen, primary amenorrhea, secondary sexual characteristics are normal. This is due to collected blood. Most probable cause is imperforate hymen. Other cause is a transverse vaginal septum or a vaginal atresia. So let's have a look. It is an anatomical problem. Fine. Let's have a look here. This is the case of imperforate hymen. This is why there is bluish bulge due to collected blood. And what is the management for imperforate hymen? A cruciate incision or a crisscross incision or a diagonal incision. We discussed, we chanted, we have written in our classes. Fine. So this is how we do crisscross or cruciate incision if it is the case of imperforate hymen. So most common is imperforate hymen, so it has to be done like this. Otherwise, normal. See, there is no opening here in this membrane. No opening in membrane. So how menstrual blood will come out? Otherwise, normally, there is an opening in this membrane, and through this opening, this menstrual blood comes out. Through this opening only, as you can see here. Through this opening, menstrual blood comes out. This is something which is normal. And if it's not the case, then look here. This is the imperforate hymen. And for this imperforate hymen, what has to be done? A cruciate incident or crisscross incident or a diagonal incident. So let's have a look. Cruciate long-term treatment with estrogen. Is there any hormonal problem? No way. Why to give any hormone? Yes, this is the answer. Cruciate incident and drainage of blood. OCP. Any hormonal problem? No way. Bilateral gonadectomy? No way. Why to remove the gonads, beta? Next question. What is the treatment of cancer cervix stage 3B? We chanted, we discussed, we revised also, and it was asked in mock test also. Thumb rule, any surgery in cervical cancer can be done if the size is less than 4 centimeter. Radical trachelectomy can be done if the size is less than 2 centimeter. Radical trachelectomy means removing cervix and stitching and parametrium and stitching uterus and vagina together. That is done if she wants future child bearing. So, treatment of cervical cancer up to 2A. Surgeries can be done, various surgeries. But in 1B3, chemoradiation, because the size is more. 2B onwards, only treatment is chemoradiation. We give chemotherapy and radiotherapy simultaneously. And we have clearly written in our notes that these chemotherapeutic drugs like cisplatin, they are acting as radiosensitizer, means increasing the efficacy of radiotherapy. So of course they are given simultaneously. We have written chemoradiation. We didn't write chemotherapy or we didn't write radiotherapy. Surgery is out of question. No radical trachelectomy, no radical hysterectomy, no radiotherapy. The answer is D, concurrent chemoradiation. Most common cause of postpartum hemorrhage is uterine atony. What else may be the chocolate question other than this? And uterine atony causes primary PPH. Most common cause of secondary PPH is retained placenta. Primary PPH is within first 24 hours. Secondary is after 24 hours and up to 12 weeks. Treatment for postpartum depression. But you remember we discussed postpartum blues in our classes, postpartum psychosis and postpartum depression. Postpartum blues, they are in first 10 days usually. They are due to sudden withdrawal of estrogen and progesterone. So we just need to reassure her. While postpartum depression, we give selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, that is fluoxetine. But many students were very dicey whether fluoxetine was given in option or not. But the best management for postpartum depression is fluoxetine. But the most severe form is postpartum psychosis, for which antipsychotic drugs are given. For depression, SSRI, fluoxetine. Another question, a 60-year-old lady presents with uterine prolapse. Okay, her age is 60 and the problem is prolapse. She is hypertensive. Okay, what is the best management? Hypertensive 60 years lady, only thing written is prolapse. None of the students told me there was any excessive bleeding or irregular bleeding or any other thing for which a gynecological big surgery has to be done. Just for prolapse, no other complaint. Hypertensive too. We don't want to enter under something major. Fine. So why to do a sling operation? Why to do a total abdominal hysterectomy? Leaford, colpoclysis and Daniel stitching, we have written clearly in our notes. We are curating vagina, so fibrous bands develop, and then they don't allow this prolapsing part to protrude out. So the best management is Leaford colpoclysis. A female presents with 3 months amenorrhea after abortion. Abortion has occurred, and then she is presenting with amenorrhea. So after abortion, no menses. Serum FSH is 6 international units. So FSH is normal FSH. What is most likely? Do you remember diagnostic protocol of secondary amenorrhea? We start with, first of all, UPT, then TSS prolactin, then progesterone challenge test, then combined estrogen progesterone challenge test. Fine. If it is negative, then it is a case of Asherman syndrome or something else. Similarly, like this, because abortion has occurred, some fibrous bands might have developed. Asherman syndrome has occurred. This is the reason for amenorrhea. Fresh pregnancy, no way. If there is a fresh pregnancy, what's going to happen to FSH in pregnancy? Estrogen and progesterone are increased. So FSH and LH are reduced. We have written in our notes in physiological changes in pregnancy. In pregnancy, FSH, LH reduced. So how can FSH be normal if it is a fresh pregnancy? Asherman syndrome, yes, FSH is normal. And abortion has occurred. So this is why fibrous bands might have developed. So Asherman syndrome can be the answer. Sheehan syndrome is postpartum necrosis of anterior lobe of pituitary. And if anterior lobe of pituitary is necrosed, how come FSH may be normal? It has to be less. Premature ovarian failure. If ovaries are failing, then there will be markedly reduced estrogen, which will paradoxically lead to increase in FSH. So this is also gone. Normal FSH, abortion has occurred. Again, a key word here. So answer is, of course, very simple, Asherman syndrome. I'm presenting you, this is the first part of OBG question. There were 50 OBG questions in 18th June examination. I have made this part 1 with 33 questions. Soon I will come to you with part 2 of remaining 17 questions. There were 50 questions in OBG and I kept on saying in our classes number of times. I said it in CCD session also. I said it in test and discussion session also. Revision session also. There will be at least 35 to 40 questions on 18th of June, OBG questions. And if you see 50 questions, don't feel surprised. The same words I told. This is just an experience. A couple presents with infertility. Lady also complains of menorrhagia. Semen analysis is normal. So infertility, male factor is normal. And on HSG, there is distal tubal dilatation. Distal tubal dilatation. The problem there in the tube and that too in the distal part. Menorrhagia also. So this is a female factor which is responsible for infertility because male factor is normal, semen analysis is normal. What is the most likely cause? Examiner is asking the cause, not the management. So it is just a one-step question. Tubal spasm, most common cause for proximal tubal block is physiological spasm, which is mostly at the cornual end. And here in HSG it is distal. We have written in our notes, most common cause of bilateral cornual block is physiological spasm. Here the problem is distal. It is gone. TB, most common pathological cause of bilateral cornual block is TB. And here the problem is distal. So TB is gone. Tubal polyp usually in the middle part and they don't cause distal dilatation of tube, and moreover, how tubal polyp will lead to menorrhagia, similarly how TB will lead to menorrhagia, similarly how tubal spasm will lead to menorrhagia. So these three are gone. Salpingitis can cause menorrhagia, can cause distal dilatation. Distal tubal blocks are mostly due to Neisseria gonorrhoeae, while cornual ones are due to Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Some students said that there was an option endometriosis as well. If endometriosis and salpingitis both were given in options, I would go in favor of endometriosis because of this word menorrhagia. Fine. So if endometriosis was there, that would be the best answer. If it was not there, salpingitis would be the answer. All the questions, I'm so happy. A woman with history of previous cesarean, fine, presents with prolonged labor. Previous cesarean, now she is presenting with prolonged labor. She is hypotensive, okay, and FHR is not audible. Oh my God, oh my God. And fetal parts are easily palpable on abdominal examination. They are easily palpable. So what is the cause? Hypotension. Previous cesarean has occurred and now she is in prolonged labor. There is high risk of scar rupture, uterine rupture. And once uterus ruptures, she becomes hypotensive. If uterus ruptures, how you can hear fetal heart sound? Fetus will die and fetus will come superficially. If uterus ruptures, fetus will come up and you can palpate fetal parts easily. So this is the case of uterine rupture. But let's have a look at other options. What is the diagnosis? Polyhydramnios. But in polyhydramnios, why FHR will not be audible? Why she will be hypotensive? And how come fetal parts are easily palpable? No way. Abruptio placentae. uterine tone will increase and something like that. Why there is hypotension? Abruptio placentae is usually associated with hypertension. And why prolonged labor? Uterine rupture. Yes, this is the answer. A para 2 woman presents with few weeks of spotting and bleeding PV. For 3 months, now comes with heavy bleeding. She gives history of D&C at some hospital, but it is still bleeding. Oh my God. So what has happened? She delivered. Then for last 3 months, she is having spotting and now which has converted to bleeding PV. And a DNC also has been done in some hospital, but is still bleeding. Oh. So what is likely? DIC, no way. In DIC is an emergency. She is an IPD patient. She can't roam around from one hospital to other hospital, get done DNC and presenting to you just with the complaint of bleeding. Lochia lasts for 2 to 3 weeks and this is 3 months. Gestational trophoblastic neoplasia, yes. Choriocarcinoma, most common symptom is irregular bleeding per vaginum despite of complete evacuation. Clearly written in our note. Retained placenta, no. It is gestational trophoblastic neoplasia. If it would have been retained placenta, bleeding should have stopped after DNC. A patient presents with septate uterus. What can be the most common complication? None of the student could clearly tell this question. A patient presents with septate uterus. What can be the most common complication? Complication is abortion. We know congenital malformations of uterus, they can result in recurrent abortion. If any one of you find, I will be coming to you with remaining 17 questions very soon. But apart from these questions, if anyone who is listening this video, if they are able to send me some more options, then you are welcome. You can send me question or options if you remember those. Thank you very much. Soon I will be coming with remaining questions with part 2. This was just a part A. Thank you. Wish you good luck. May everyone pass the exam.